Vengeance demon hunters embrace the demon within to protect not only themselves, but also their allies. I'm going to show you today everything you need to know to succeed. It's going to be beginner friendly and digestible, while also being fine for veterans, giving you everything you need to know. So, starting off with the stats and stat priority, our main stat is agility. This is going to increase our dodge chance, we can dodge attacks, and also how much damage we do. You are generally going to want a higher and higher item level of gear to get more agility. Secondary stats, however, you can loosely follow this priority here. Now, with that being said, again, it is really important to just get a higher eye level, especially if you are a beginner. The stat priorities and which ones we're having are not that important unless we are comparing two items of the same eye level, which generally you're not doing until maximum eye level. Looking at the secondary stats then, haste is going to increase how quickly we attack, which is insane for demon hunters, by the way. Versatility will increase any damage and healing done, while simultaneously reducing damage taken. And then as a tank, we do have dodge and parry chance, so we can dodge attacks, etc. We've got crit chance, meaning a chance to do more damage and increasing our parry chance. Mastery, for us Vengeance demon hunters, is Fel Blood. Increases armor by a percentage of our agility. Armor bonus is doubled while your ability, Demon Spikes, is active. And it's also going to increase your attack power, and that's what our mastery does. While we're here, let's take a quick look at the set bonus that we are getting in Season 1 of The War Within. It's called Husk of the Hypergeal Nemesis. Soul Cleave deals increased damage and has a percentage chance to shatter a lesser soul fragment from a target it hits. And the full set means consuming a soul fragment increases the damage and healing of our next Fel Devastation. Now, if you're not sure what those abilities are, don't worry. I'll be covering them in full in this video shortly. So now we're going to have a look at some of the utilities and defensives, etc. that we do have available to us as a demon hunter in The War Within. So, generally, the ones I'm showing you are what I like to consider the most important that you need to know about. There's always going to be bits and bobs that you may not know or that may be lurking in your spellbook, and I would advise that once you're more comfortable with the new rotation, etc., that you just make yourself familiar with what you do have available, especially if you are a beginner. So on the left here, we've got the first one, which is Vengeful Retreat. Remove all snares and vault away, like that. Nearby enemies take damage and they have their movement speed reduced by 70% for 3 seconds. So we're going to get out of the way and we're also going to actually slow down our enemy at the same time. Then we have Glide, which reduces your falling speed. This is, again, a very niche one. It depends when we're going to use this. You can activate this ability while jumping and falling. You can see here I'm gliding down, and this isn't on a cooldown either, meaning you can use this pretty much whenever you like. It can get you out of some really sticky situations on certain bosses, etc., that may throw you into the... We then have Disrupt, and this is literally our interrupt, or otherwise known as a kick. And this is the way that we are going to interrupt our enemies' spellcasting pretty simply. And if you are a beginner, I must let you know that interrupting spellcasting is incredibly powerful and important in both Mythic Plus and PvP. Raiding, not as often, but it still can be important on certain bosses that need interrupts. But you should be interrupting spellcasting whenever you possibly can on your... Then we have Imprison. This is going to imprison a demon, beast, or humanoid, incapacitating them for an entire minute. You cannot damage them, or that will interrupt the effect. So again, it is only actually applicable to certain types of enemies, that being demons, beasts, or humanoids. Then we have Metamorphosis. This is something I'm going to cover more in the rotation part. However, it's a really, really useful cooldown that I want to make you aware of now. So as you can see, you go into, Big Daddy Demon mode, leap into the air and land, dealing chaos damage to enemies within 8 yards, and then stun them for 3 seconds. Players are dazed for 3 seconds instead. Say if you do it in PvP, basically, it's 3 seconds instead. Upon landing, you are transformed into a hellish demon for 20 seconds, greatly empowering your Chaos Strike and Blade Dance abilities and gaining 20% haste and 12% leech. So you can see leech on here. So basically these are, we have our primary stat, ability, our secondary stats, crit, haste, mastery, verse, and then leech is what I like to call a tertiary stat. And we have leech, avoidance, and speed. Speed, speeding you up, avoidance, meaning you can avoid AoE damage, and leech, meaning that, of course, you return a portion of damage back as healing. So you're only going to see that on your stats when you have some of it. If you don't have any leech, avoidance, or speed, you won't see the stat on your... Then we have darkness, summoning darkness around you in an 8-yard radius, granting friendly targets a 15% chance to avoid all damage from an attack. Chance to avoid damage is increased when not in a raid. So if you're on your own or you're in a party, like a Mythic Plus group or a dungeon group, then that chance is massively increased. Then Sigil of Mastery, you can see it places this sigil on the floor. When the enemies then touch it, like they just did, they are going to cower in fear and be disoriented for 15s. And those are the main utilities and sort of defensive abilities, etc., that we've got available to us as a Demon Hunter in Season 1, Patch 11 of The War Within. Like I said before, do look through the Demon Hunter talent tree and the spell book, because there sometimes are other utilities that may have more niche uses, but for any beginners watching, or just people coming back to The War Within, or looking at the new rotations for it, I don't want to overwhelm you. Now for the fun part, of course, which is the rotation and how we're going to play Vengeance Demon Hunter. In the raid build, which is what we're starting with, we are going to be playing as an Aldrachi Reaver, which I'll be going through in more detail shortly. In Mythic Plus, however, we are not. We're using a different hero talent, so you'll have to just wait and see for that one, even though it's Demon Hunter, so there's only 2, but, you know. So the first thing is going into becoming a demon is going to be our top priority as a Vengeance Demon Hunter, using the Metamorphosis cooldown. Transform into a demon, increasing current and maximum health by 40% and armor by 200%, which is a massive defensive cooldown. While transformed, Shear and Fracture generate one additional lesser soul fragment and more fury. So we can check it out here. Oh my god, we are a demon. And then after that, we're going to be using the Hunt. Charge your target, striking them for damage, rooting them in place, and inflicting loads of damage over a few seconds, up to 5 enemies in your path. The pursuit invigorates your soul, healing you for some of the damage done to your target as well for 20 seconds. The main reason we want to use this as our number 2 priority is to actually activate this here, Reaver's Glaive. Throw a glaive enhanced with the essence of consumed souls at your target, dealing damage and ricocheting to other enemies. Begins a well-practiced pattern of glaive work, etc., etc. As you can see here, once I use it, it goes back to Throw Glaive. That is from your Aldrachi Reaver hero talents. And we do only want to use it at this part in the rotation if it is enhanced into the Aldrachi version. After that, we're going to be using Spirit Bomb. Consume up to 5 available soul fragments and then explode, damaging nearby enemies for fire damage per fragment consumed and afflicting them with frailty, causing you to heal for some of the damage you deal to them. Now, we're going to be using it at this point. It does cost 40 Fury, which is our main resource. And at this point, we're going to be using it if we've got this soul fragments, etc., left over from a previous pull, which may be sometimes we will, sometimes we won't. Otherwise, if you can't, go on to Infernal Strike. Leap through the air towards a targeted location, dealing fire damage to all enemies within 6 yards. And do that if you're near 2 charges. We basically just don't want to cap out at the maximum charges. After that, we have Fiery Brand, which we're going to use. And you can see this is putting it on the target. Branded, taking fire damage every second and dealing 40% less damage to us, the Demon Hunter, and taking more damage from us. So we take less damage, but we deal more damage, which is perfect. And we want to keep that up as much as possible so you can use it on cooldown. And then we've got Sigil of Flame. Place a sigil at the target, which will activate, dealing fire damage and an additional amount to all enemies, and generates 30 Fury. So you want to basically use this, not trying to overcap on Fury, which isn't really an issue as much as it is in Havoc than it is for Vengeance. If you have got at least 50 Fury, then we can use Fell Devastation, which costs 50 Fury, quite an expensive one there. Unleash the Fel within you, damaging enemies directly in front of you for a huge amount of fire damage and causing damage. Also healing us again. We're doing a lot of healing as a Vengeance Demon Hunter, as you can see. After that, we can use Soul Carver on a minute cooldown. And you can see here the soul fragments are coming out. We're going to be explaining when we're using these as well, more in the hero talent rotation. Carve into the soul of your target, dealing fire damage and an additional amount of fire damage over a few seconds, immediately shattering 3 lesser soul fragments from the target and an additional lesser soul fragment every second. After that, then we're going to again be using our Spirit Bomb if we can, with 5 souls during Fiery Brand to make the most out of it. After that, pretty much just using these last few things in order as a very low priority or at the lowest priority. Soul Cleave, viciously striking 5 enemies in front of you, dealing physical damage, and again healing ourselves. Consumes up to 2 available soul fragments and heals you for an additional amount for each one that you do consume. Then we have Immolation Aura. Engulf yourself in flames, instantly causing fire damage to enemies within 8 yards. This is going to generate 26 Fury over 9 seconds. Really helps on Fury generation for this one. And speaking of Fury generation, Fell Blade, charge to your target, dealing damage, and this will also generate 40 Fury, so try not to overcap with this ability. And lastly, if we won't cap on souls or anything, or fury, we can use Fracture, rapidly slash the target for physical damage and shatter 2 lesser soul fragments from them. And finally, if you've got nothing else to press, then it's just going to be Throw Glaive. Not, however, the enhanced version, just the basic version here. One thing to mention is when you do have your Immolation Aura active, you're going to take 10% reduced magic damage from the Fell Flame Fortification talent, which is obviously helpful. And Immolation Aura, will also increase the duration of your Fiery Brand and Sigil of Flame by 0.5 seconds as well. And then another thing that is actually passively happening is Illuminated Sigils. You've got a 12% increased chance to parry attacks from enemies that are afflicted by your Sigil of Flame. So some things like that may look like an offensive ability, but actually have a bit of defensiveness built into them secretly in the talents. Speaking about the soul fragments as well that are going to be dotted around that we can, walk over and consume. Consuming a soul fragment reduces all damage you take by a percentage for 6 seconds, and this can stack. Consuming a soul fragment reduces... so that's the next rank. I nearly read it out again. And every 10 soul fragments that you consume increases the damage of your next soul cleave or spirit bomb by a whopping 40%. Now I'm going to have a look at the hero talents, seeing how they're all going to work together, and then take a look at what we're doing in a Mythic Plus or Open World or Delve situation. So in this build, we are going with Aldrachi Reaver. It's all about using your glaives, etc. with this one. I do want to say before we get into it, this is only enhancing the rotation that I've already shown you. In fact, that's even worded badly. This is already included in the rotation I've shown you. I'm just talking now about why we're doing the rotation, because hero talents are new. I think it's important that we do look through them. So we're going to get Art of the Glaive. This is the keystone talent in the hero talents. Consuming 20 soul fragments or casting the Hunt converts your next throw glaive into Reaver's Glaive instead. That's going to throw a glaive enhanced with the essence of consumed souls at your target, dealing massive damage and ricocheting to additional enemies. It's actually also going to begin a well-practiced pattern of glaive work, enhancing your next Fracture and Soul Cleave. The enhanced ability you cast first deals increased damage, and the second deals even more increased damage. Going down the left side first, we have Fury of the Aldrachi. When enhanced by Reaver's Glaive, Soul Cleave casts 3 additional glaive slashes to nearby targets. If cast after Fracture, it casts 6 slashes instead. Aldrachi Tactics, the second enhanced ability in the pattern, shatters an additional soul fragment. Soul Cleave damage is increased here. We've got a choice option where Vengeful Retreat resets the cooldown of Fell Blade, or can be cast a second time. Up to you, of course. I will be putting links in the description for talents imports anyway. Incorruptible Spirit, each soul fragment you consume shields you for an additional 15% amount healed, and Fell Blade surrounds you with the Blade of the Ward, reducing damage taken. So a utility choice there. Preemptive Strike, Throw Grave deals damage to enemies near its initial target, or it's going to generate Fury for you. Last 3 on the side, when enhanced by Reaver's Glaive, Fracture is going to apply Reaver's Mark, which causes the target to take more damage, and if it's cast after Soul Cleave, it's actually increased to 14% from 7%. Wounded Quarry, while Reaver's Mark's on your target, melee attack strike with an additional glaive slash. TLDR then, basically on all this, we're just doing lots more glaive. There's glaives flying around everywhere, doing tons more damage passively with the rotation we're already doing, which is really chaotic and really cool. Warblade's Hunger, consuming a soul fragment causes your next Fracture to deal more damage. And lastly, Thrill of the Fight. Once you consume both enhancements, you gain Thrill of the Fight, increasing your attack speed by 15% for 20 seconds and your damage and healing for 20% for 10 seconds. So again, As it says there, their warriors were ultimate glaive masters and wielded their blades of deadly grace, consuming souls and imbuing their weapons with greater power. And that is what we're doing here. We're just enhancing our glaive abilities to do more damage and adding more utility into the mix. Now moving into the Mythic Plus build that we have here, we are going for Fel-Scarred instead, where Metamorphosis now also greatly empowers Soul Cleave and Spirit Bomb. It really does affect your Metamorphosis and kind of just works all around that. Same as before, we'll be looking through that one after we go through the main rotation. So we're going to be using Metamorphosis as our number one priority here, but specifically only if Sigil of Flame and our Fel Devastation here are on cooldown. We don't want to use it otherwise. Again, if we're at or near 2 charges of Infernal Strike, we're still going to be using it as a priority here. Then adding our Fiery Brand and using our Sigil of Flame to the targets, using Fel Devastation if we have at least 50 Fury, obviously, because you can't use it otherwise. And then we're going to be using Sigil of Spite rather than the Hunt. This is a bit different. Place a demonic sigil at the target location that activates and it'll detonate, dealing chaos damage and shatter up to 3 lesser soul fragments from enemies affected by the sigil. Reduced damage beyond 5 targets. Again, after that, it's going to be Soul Carver as before on cooldown. And then when we've got 4 or more souls, we want to use our Spirit Bomb here, but specifically in Metamorphosis. So 4 or more souls and in Metamorphosis. What I actually showed in my Havoc video, which might be interesting for you guys watching the Vengeance one here, is I put another action bar up and I put Metamorphosis below them so that you know only use this spell when in Metamorphosis. Up to you, but if you're a beginner, it just might be an easy way to remember when you need to use certain spells, because Demon Hunter is really quite complex and the rotation it's quite a lot longer than other specs. After that, we can spend any excess kind of fury that we have with our Soul Cleave. This is our main fury dump, if you will, viciously striking up to 5 enemies in front of us, etc., and consuming up to 2 soul fragments to heal us. After that, as usual, use your Immolation Aura, use your Fracture. If you're not going to cap on anything like souls or fury, my God, I'm like so burnt out from filming these. And then it's going to be Fellblade, again, if we won't cap Fury, because remember, it does generate 40 Fury with it, so just do be careful there. And again, if you've not got anything else to press, then it's just going to be pretty much throw glaive. Remember, in Mythic Plus build, it's not going to be going into the super duper version, because we are using a different hero talent. So for this build, we are going to be going with Fel-Scarred. This is interesting. This is all about enhancing your Metamorphosis. So we start off here with Demon Surge. And before we get into it, I do want to say the the hero talents I'm about to show you are already all factored into the rotation I have shown you. We're more now looking at the why around the what. The what being the rotation, the why being, the talents, etc. as to why we're doing that rotation. So Demon Surge. Metamorphosis now also greatly empowers Soul Cleave and Spirit Bomb. While Demon Form is active, the first cast of each empowered ability induces a Demon Surge, causing you to explode with Fel energy. So it's basically doing some more AoE damage, etc. We've got our first choice node here, Wave of Debilitation. Chaos Nova slows enemies for 60% and reduces their attack speed, or you can just have your movement speed increased by 1% per 10 Fury. Up to you there, of course. Burning Blades. Your blades burn Fel energy, causing your Soul Cleave, Throw Glaive, and auto attacks to deal additional damage as fire over 6 seconds. Maximum Fury is increased. Demon Surge deals increased damage against a single target. So it's doing more against a single target, less against AoE, makes sense. When you activate Metamorphosis, the cooldowns on your Sigil of Flame and Fel Devastation are immediately reset, which is nice, and cooldown reductions. We've got Flamebound here, where Immolation Aura has an increased radius and better critical strike damage. And then Student of Suffering here. Sigil of Flame applies Student of Suffering to you, increasing mastery and granting some fury. On the right-hand side, we've got improved Soul Rending. Leech granted by Soul Rending is increased and an additional amount while Metamorphosis is active, or you can go for Set Fire to the Pain, where 5% of all non-fire damage taken is instead taken as fire damage, and it'll actually subsequently reduce the fire damage you take. Enduring Torment. The effects of your demon form persist outside of it in a weakened state, increasing maximum health and armor. And Agility is increased by 8% when you're not in your demon form. What these talents are doing is bridging the gap between demon form and non-demon form, essentially, which is quite cool. Lastly, we have Demonic Intensity. Activating Metamorphosis greatly empowers Fel Devastation, Immolation Aura, and Sigil of Flame. Demon Surge damage is increased by 10% for each time it previously triggered while your demon form is active. So again, it's just enhancing our Metamorphosis, enhancing us when we're not in Metamorphosis, and kind of bridging that gap. For the consumables and enchants, etc., that we're going to be using, the first thing first is that we can now get Nerubian Gem Weavers. This is how we're going to get extra slots on our gear from the weekly vault, and you can put that on your head, wrist, and belt. On the cloak, we're going to put Chant of Winged Grace, giving avoidance and reducing fall damage. On the chest, it's Crystalline Radiance, giving primary stat. On the wrist, it's Armored Avoidance, great for tanking. Stormbound Armor Kit, giving primary stat on your legs. Defender's March on the boots. I would go for versatility on your rings, depending what you need more as a secondary stat, especially if you're simming, could change this, but I do always like in tanking, just getting a bit of extra versatility to increase damage done and also reduce damage taken. I think you can never go wrong with that. And for the weapon, whether you are a tank with a two-hander or dual-wielding tanks, I do think Authority of the Depths is always going to be the best weapon enchant for you in Season 1 of The War Within. What this does is, when you're doing damage, it will sometimes do big shadow damage to your enemy, and that can stack 3 times. For the actual consumables you're going to be using, generally, again, I would go for the Tempered Versatility Flask, again, giving you a good all-round. Feasts are fantastic, of course, for primary stat. Tempered Potions basically will give you massive increases to your secondary stats that you don't get from your flask, so everything but versatility. Algari Healing Potions, and then Whetstones. There's 2 different ones depending on obviously what tank you are. If you're using sword, axes, polearms, maces, staffs, and fist weapons, then you can use, there's 2 different ones to choose from there. Crystallized Augment Runes will give you primary stat, and finally on your on your sockets, you're going to go with the Culminating Blasphemite. It's going to increase primary stat and give you more crit effect depending on how many different coloured gems you're using, like sapphires, onyxes, emeralds, and rubies. You want 1 of each colour at least to get the full effect from the epic gem. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in The War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in The War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for The War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVUI, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.